Hey, welcome to European Glimpse, the podcast that dives right into what's going on in Europe at the moment. I'm your host, Alice, and today we're going to take a look at a curious and at times unsettling phenomenon unfolding in Croatia. For nearly 3 years, men have been gathering in public squares across the country, kneeling in prayer as part of an initiative called Be Manly. These are not just quiet personal devotions. They are highly visible protests with specific aims that touch upon deep-seated cultural and societal values. Croatia, a country that many people now mainly know for its beautiful beaches and beautiful countryside, is a country with a strong Catholic identity that played a significant role in its post-Yugoslav independence. And it's now seeing men publicly asserting what they believe are essential roles for men and the family. Their prayers encompass a wide range of intentions, from national peace and spiritual conversation to premarital chastity, the restoration of Catholic marriages, and the ending of abortions, even advocating for men to become spiritual authorities within the family. The movement, which began in October 2022 on Zagreb's main square, raises questions about the intersection of religion, gender, identity, and public values, which we now share in Europe. How did this movement gain traction in a country that was once part of the socialist system where religion was suppressed? What is the role of the media in shaping public perception of such movements? To help me understand this complex issue, I'm joined today by Anamaria. She's a researcher who has closely studied the Be Manly movement and its media representation in Croatia. Anamaria will shed a light on the role of the media amplifying or criticizing these public displays of faith and ideology. Stay with us as we unpack the layers of this compelling story. Anamaria, welcome to the podcast. I'm very glad that you found time to explain to me what has been going on in Croatia for now nearly 3 years. We have those Catholic protests, one may call them, or at least, well, something is happening on the stage. For our viewers and our listeners who don't know Croatia that well, could you perhaps explain a little bit what has been going on in Croatia for the last years that might have contributed to this development and what have led to the men taking up public space to be manly?
Thank you, Alice, first of all, for inviting me to talk about this topic. So, the Be Manly is the name of the initiative that does the protests, that supports them, that gathers the men. And I would say that the roots for what's happening right now have been well established decades ago, because their first plan of acting is through prayers, through Catholic prayers, because Croatia is a very homogeneous country, racially and religiously, in every conceivable way. So Catholic religion has a really, really big influence on people here. But maybe I should start with what they are praying for, and I would like for that to be exact, so I'm gonna read it out from their webpage, because they have a webpage where they explain everything, why they do it and what their goals are. So in quotations, this is what they pray for homeland, for peace, for Croatia's people's conversion, for men to become spiritual authorities in the family, premarital chastity, dressing and behavioral chastity, the restoration of Catholic marriages, ending abortions, for holy, authentic and uncompromising church pastors, new spiritual vocations, souls in purgatory, and for personal purposes. So they gather every first Saturday in the month, each month in the morning. They started on the main square in Croatia, in Zagreb, and then it kind of spread in multiple cities in public spaces, and it's been going consistent. I don't think there's been a Saturday where they missed it since October 2022.
almost 3 years, 2.5.
Almost 3 years.
Getting close to 3. Perhaps it would be interesting as well for the listeners to understand the meaning of Catholicism, because what I found so interesting about Croatia, it was part of Yugoslavia, as we know. We either have read or experienced or witnessed in the media the horrible wars that took place when Yugoslavia ended, and Yugoslavia was a socialist system where religion did not have that much of a place. It was technically forbidden, but Catholicism is a very important pillar of Croatian identity. Could you speak a little bit on that?
Yes, so when Croatia went to gain its independence, one of the key places where the identity was built was religion. Catholic religion that was very distinct to Croatian people in comparison to other nationalities that were part of Yugoslavia. And there are many things that remained from that fight for independence, including Catholicism. And even though we are a democracy now and on paper secular, in reality it hasn't really been like that. Catholic religion and Catholic Church, I would say it's better to say Catholic Church as an institution, has had a grip on public, political, and every other part of life. So the transition to democracy happened throughout the 90s, but in early 2000s there has been a rise of civil movements that opposed, for example, sexual education curriculums in schools, as they saw it as something that the children shouldn't be sexually educated, and in schools they should be taught the church-approved abstinence-based sexual education, if you can call it so. And then it just stemmed from there. For the longest time it has stayed within the confinements of sexual education, anti-abortion movements, and the fight against gender ideology. I would say that the most successful way where something was accomplished was the 2013 constitutional change. It was a referendum for putting in the constitution that the marriage is between a man and a woman. But what's happening now with Be Manly, I think, is in part tethered to Catholicism and in part influenced by what's happening globally.
When we did our little pre-conversation for this, I as well wondered. It seems that all over the globe there are currently masculinist movements, men's rights movements, however you want to call it. It's all taking place more or less at the same time, and the Be Manly movement in Croatia started 3 years ago almost. And I would just like to know, what is the context that Croatia is currently in, where apparently men saw the necessity to find their voice in public and try to persuade the public for their causes?
Well, it's really hard for me to speak from an objective perspective, because I think we as people are always in our own bubbles, and I haven't personally seen a need for the fight for men's rights, because they notoriously are not a really marginalized group of people. Straight white men are just not a group of people that is marginalized, and it's not a group of people that we usually saw looking for their rights. But what I think it's really a part of that global influence of that the social media has a great play in it, because we all see those incel type podcasts and the Andrew Tate and the Andrew Tate wannabes, and it always seems very far away when it's someone from America, from a different continent, from a different context, and it doesn't seem real when it comes here. Even then it seems like something out of place. As they state on their webpage, the Be Manly movement, they were inspired by pictures they saw from Poland and Australia, where men also knelt for their rights for Catholic authority through men. for restricting women in their clothing and in their reproductive rights, which is arguably their highest offense. And I think it's a part of that global influence. We saw Poland getting radicalized in a way, maybe it's a strong word, but we saw Catholic Church gain a really, really big support, and right-wing options getting really big support in Poland, which then inspired the Croatian movement. But what is a descriptor for men's rights movements is that they are a backlash movement. A backlash movement against what? A backlash movement against feminism. And we in Croatia, we mainly watch Western media, Western movies, Western TV shows, and there's been a strong push in recent years for diversity in casting, for talking about marginalized people's, marginalized groups' lives and themes. And those are all influences that brought about the opinion of one group of people that we have entered the part of progress, of societal progress, that might be harmful. They specifically in their goals target women, even though if you look on their page, they have a sort of a Q&A page where there's a question, why are you against women? And they answer, who says that we are? We are not. And they basically are very defensive in that way. If you ask them, they will explicitly say that they are not against women. But yes, I would say that what's happening now is an amalgamation of that historical context of the influence of the Catholic Church as an institution and the global changes we see in general.
What would you say is the mechanism of how they gain popularity and how they spread their messages? Because the protests, we have to picture it, it's men kneeling on public squares. They're silent and they hold up images of the Virgin Mary, and it's a silent protest in a certain way. So what happens after they protest or during the protest so that they gain traction and more visibility?
Well, I think the key thing is what my paper is about. The mainstream media recording them. They are not at the main square in the capital of Croatia. They didn't start there not to be visible. Right. They started there because they want the media visibility, but they are very contradictory in that sense that they refuse to give any media statements. Technically, that's also what they say, that they refuse to talk to media. But also through my research, I found out that there are certain members who gave their responses to media privately, even though they say they are not affiliated with anyone. And how they gain people to come there is through their network, because it's not a new group, it's not a new movement in that sense. The Be Manly prayers are new, not new anymore, but their most recent project, maybe, but they are called the Knights of Mary's Heart, and they have been working for quite a while, but they are not mainstream, so they go under the radar. So I think when they first started, the men who first did it were gained through that network, through their internal participants, and then through exposure in media, they gained many more.
This exposure in media that you have been describing as well in your research set the stage for me. Tell me a little bit about how Croatian media is currently set up in terms of values, press freedom, if you have different factions. How would you describe it to somebody who doesn't know Croatian media?
So I would say that Croatian media is free. There's always the undertones of political affiliations that you can read out of the articles when you just critically read. But Croatian media, most of mainstream Croatian media outlets don't state in any way that they are for this or that political option. So you can't really divide them by that. The way that I have, for my research, collected a range of media ideologies is by consulting with researchers of people who read them, of people who consume them, what they affiliate as, because we also, as people, tend to turn to media that has similar ideologies as we do. So there's a wide spectrum. There's something for everyone, I would say.
In the press freedom of the Reporters Without Borders ranking, Croatia's ranking currently at number 60 out of 180. It used to be a little bit higher. Would you say that over the last years there have been influential factors that have perhaps reduced press freedom or that have reduced different voices in the media landscape?
Yes, I think media in general is facing many challenges now. People rarely now differentiate media outlets from social media. Media is facing an ever-growing lack of trust, and the primary source of financing being advertisements, and that brings about sensationalism in media. We don't even have a proper tabloid media in that sense, in that classical journalist sense that you're taught in school what a tabloid should look like. But a lot of the serious mainstream media have tabloid qualities because I think of this convergence, and this especially I think is relevant for the press media, for the printed media, because nobody is buying papers anymore. I think TV and radio are still holding up quite well, but people are informing themselves mainly through social media by reading just the titles of articles that are online, and just they're just not bothered enough to read the entire thing, let alone articles from 3 different sources, so they would gain a full picture. So I think those are the challenges.
But now tell me, how do you see media amplifying or criticizing the Be Manly movement? Like, what have been the views of different media observers, and how does the public react to that?
So for context, yeah, my research was conducted over 72 articles gathered in 5 different media that ranged from most left to most right leaning, and encompassed the first year of Be Manly's actions. All media have been found guilty of mainstreaming in one way or another. One of the things is agenda setting, how they do it. So you can, as a media outlet, decide whose ideas you are going to propel as facts or as right, and those that were leaning to the politically right options amplified the Be Manly's causes. They often quoted them. They often included links to their webpage, to their Facebook, while the media that was mostly left-leaning, they amplified the counter-protests, because with the Be Manly movement, people who are against them also started to gather at the squares, and there's also been trivialization, which both did, but with different motivations. The left-leaning media often, they report about Be Manly, their language is ironic, sarcastic even in a way, and they try to minimize their effect in that way. I checked the articles recently to see how they're holding up. I think last month there's been a condemned war criminal kneeling there as well, who is now served his prison sentence, and that was in left-leaning media, that was the main headline, like, oh, there's a war criminal there, while in the right-leaning media the headline was, there's a familiar face.
Okay, explain this part specifically for me. You have a war criminal, somebody who was imprisoned for conducting atrocities during the Yugoslav wars, during the independence war of Croatia. And now this person reappears.
He's been a public figure for more years now. He's been out of the prison for a longer time. So his name is Dario Kordic, and I'm not as familiar with his work. We aren't really taught that much about war criminals in schools. Anyways, he committed atrocities more in the mid 90s, more accurately in Bosnia. I think he served 20 something years, something like that.
And now you have this person reappearing, supporting the Be Manly protests. And you have one side in the media spectrum and probably in society being horrified by what this means and what this implies. And you have the other side who are nonchalant about it and say that's a familiar face. How does that pan out?
Well, I read both articles, and one was mortified in a way, the one from the left-leaning media, and the one from the right-leaning media. Besides that, there's a familiar face headline just kind of listed his Wikipedia page without any criticism. But that's not the first time that there's been people with a certain symbolism gathering on the Be Manly prayers. There's been also people with Ustasha symbols, which is, to simplify it, the Croatian Nazis, basically. Be Manly had to put a disclaimer on their webpage that they do not align with those symbols, that they do not invite those people to come to their space because they are aware of what that means and how harmful it is for their image and for the image of their protests. So even they are against it, right? Some media are minimizing what that means, and that's one way of amplifying the Be Manly cause as not as harmful, as more normal in a way. And the other way how all media do it is they've just accepted it as normal. I think when you see those images, or if you were to take a walk on a Saturday morning in Zagreb, that it would be very jarring for anyone to see what's happening there. Men surrounded by a fence. Everyone can see the pictures online by Googling it. They're surrounded by a fence, kneeling and praying. It doesn't even last that long. I think they say it's like 45 minutes just to pray the rosary. And they also have women that are outside of the fence. The women are not allowed inside the fence, even if they are supporters who also want to pray. It's become normal. The media are reporting as that site that is very, in my opinion, jarring, in a way even disturbing, when they start to list their causes. For media, it's now the way that they report about it, and the way that they started reporting about it in the first year, in the first few months, was another Saturday, another prayer. It's normal. It's to be expected. And what I personally think is very harmful and dangerous in a way, or especially taking in the entire Western world situation right now, is if we made this normal, what's to come next? What's to be expected as becoming normal next?
I would like you to elaborate a little bit more where you see the harm, because what I have observed in a lot of masculinist discourse, pro-men discourse, is very often surrounding around the topic of family. Croatia has been below replication rate since 1970, roughly. So I checked the data, and I think it fell below 2.1, which is like the births per woman around 1970. And it has fallen to roughly 1.5 births per woman. And this is something that a lot of people see as something very dangerous, because societies are imploding and there is no family structure anymore, something that people are concerned about in terms of what are the future generations going to look like? Are there going to be future generations? And this is very often a topic where I see people are concerned about it and support as well very far right-wing positions. So maybe some might say, oh, this is actually necessary, or it is a reasonable backlash to what society has been doing over the last decades. More individualism, less families, Where do you see the particular harm that is happening now to the Croatian society and the Croatian discourse?
First of all, to comment on the birth rate, I don't think the number of births per woman is lower because women are going for abortions left and right. I think that the birth rate number is lower because Croatia has a long and well-established history of migration to Western European countries, to Australia, in pursuit of a better life, of better paychecks. I think the decisions to have less children or have children later in life are not based in anything that Be Manly is fighting against. They are based in economics, in the fact that people can't afford to have many children, or so. That's kind of one ridiculous statement, we would say. I really don't think what Be Manly are fighting for has anything to do with why the birth rate is lower. But to come back to the question of what I see as dangerous is, as I've said, so we have accepted people who regularly and consistently fight for basically stripping women of some of their rights, of their autonomy. Like, you shouldn't dress that way. You shouldn't have the power to say what to do with your body. If we accepted those ideas as normal, as mainstream, I'm afraid of what idea is going to come next, because each time that barrier gets pushed, the next idea that comes, it might have seemed super radical 5 years ago or 3 years ago, but now when we have for 3 years made this group of people normal, then the idea that comes next might seem mild.
And what's the conversation about particularly these developments in Croatian society? Have you checked any polls on supporters and people who are criticizing this particular movement? Where do people stand? You said it's been normalized until now, but at the same time, probably there are people who are having strong feelings about what is panning out in the public prayers.
My research is the first, and I think for now maybe the only one covering the topic that is published outside of some internal academic projects. Like, probably students have written seminars about them and such. There's one thing that I suggest. I think there should be like a sociology based research for participants. I don't know if that would be even possible, if the participants would be willing to do that, but that's for their motivations to gain the full scope of it. The only way to see how the public think is reading the comments on the articles, which isn't optimal.
One survey from 2023 where they polled Croatians, and 75% of Croatians said that they do not support the Be Manly movement. 15% were in favor, and the rest were somewhere in between. So it shows that the public is not particularly in favor of that. Yet there is still like a lot of media traction. There's a lot of debate sparking by that. Do you think that from the particular protest movement, there are spillover effects that you might see in political parties and agendas?
I don't think that I can say that what's happening politically in Croatia, I cannot firmly state that it's a consequence of Be Manly. I do not think they are politically very strong in themselves in the way that they are going to push policies. I think that we as a society have in general saw an emergence of right-wing options. Smaller, maybe, but in the recent years there's been more and more right-wing political options, while the left is being pretty quiet. And I think that's also coinciding with trends elsewhere in Europe. And I don't know what to expect in the future. It could be either we go further in that direction, or the pendulum swings back, as has historically done in many places.
I would just like to ask you for another observation about particularly the Catholic Church and how people who are devout Catholics are reacting to it, because it might appear as if the only Catholic interpretation of current societal trends might be to reject feminism and to go to these very traditional values. I don't think that this is the only way how Catholicism could react or should react. I think that in all denominations and all faiths, there's always a spectrum of how people are dealing with modern societal developments. Do you see that there is as well a spectrum within the Catholic Croatian Church when it comes to topics like family, like gender, like women's rights? Or would you say that what the Be Manly protests are depicting is mainstream?
I would say that that it would be wrong to put all Catholic people under the conservative umbrella. I think that would be very wrong. I have recently spoken to a colleague and who told me that she never perceived it as anything relevant and didn't even connect the dots because in her circle she has a lot of Catholic female friends who are also feminists. I don't think that the Catholic religion speaks in its entirety for every individual. I think that's still very much individually based, and I wouldn't say that all the harmful things that Be Manly are for, that they are supported by the Catholic Church. The Catholic Church has since been very quiet on it. The media, especially in the beginning, they've tried to ask the priests and bishops to basically to give a statement. So what is your opinion on this? Because the Be Manly movement is so strongly Catholic that you cannot ignore it. So it's kind of normal for media to be like, okay, so what's the Catholic Church's stance on that? And they have stood aside. They haven't given any comment on them.
How do you think should the media ultimately depict these movements? Because you found in your research that there have been very, very strongly supportive articles from certain media outlets, while others were even satirizing and trying to minimize the influence of it. And in your ideal setting, how would you say should the media go on reporting about what the kneelers are doing?
Well, I think that the answer lies somewhere in more critical approach. I think that media should look for what ideas they are propelling. Some of them are already doing that. Put more focus on the counter protests, on way it's harmful. Include more critical articles by experts. Interview some experts, sociologists, theologists, etc. This is connected with challenges of the media. When you have articles like that, currently they are usually under a paywall when you have like an in-depth research. So those articles, they even exist, but they are not available to the majority of people, which I think they kind of should be, because most people are not going to read academic papers on it and researches on it.
You mentioned the counter-protest now a couple of times. I know that your research was particularly on the Be Manly protests and how the reporting took place, but can you explain as well a little bit about the counter-protests? I saw as well some images of people who are gathering by the protest camp when the men are doing the prayer. How big are they? Can you elaborate on that?
The feminist groups, the groups for LGBT plus rights, those are the groups that are behind the counter protests, and basically they're there just to say that women should have autonomy over their bodies. And I think as long as there's going to be manly protest prayers, there's gonna be them as well. And for the most part, they are divided on the square. So as I've said, the Be Manly protesters are behind a fence. Their protests are regularly reported to the police, so they also have a police there to prevent and intervene in any type of incident. And for the most part, the protest and counter protest go peacefully without incidents, so they coexist in a way.
I think it's a very interesting view overall to see that you have such a poignant example of this current trend everywhere taking place in Europe, where there's more and more pro-men's movements and anti-feminist backlash. And when you look at the pictures, when you just Google what is happening in Croatia with the kneelers, this is just such a strong, visceral image to see the people in the public. And I was quite surprised when I stumbled across your paper that I had not seen anything about that in German media. In international media, I found a couple of articles. I think it's very interesting that you have such an illustration of current cultural clashes in Croatia. And to me, it was a little bit of a confirmation that the trends that we are facing in Germany and in other European countries are not isolated. Everything seems to be currently happening in one global trend because social media has a strong influence, because there are international networks, because ideas nowadays flow so freely. And yeah, thank you very much for exploring this topic and explaining it to me. It was very interesting for me to dive into, like, oh, wow, this is happening as well in Croatia. And I hope that the listeners are going to as well Google a little bit about that and see for themselves what is happening in one of our European neighboring countries. And so, yeah, Anamaria, thank you very much for the conversation. Thank you for listening to this episode of European Glimpse. This is a passion project of mine, and it would make me very happy if you subscribed or shared this episode with a friend. Now I'm curious to find a new guest. Are you a journalist, a scholar, a student, or perhaps an avid observer of society? If you live in a European country, as well outside of the European Union, reach out to me or recommend somebody I should speak to. I would as well love to hear your feedback on this podcast, as I'm always trying to improve, and my email is europeanglimpse@gmail.com. Take care.